Hey, Algebra 2. So what we're going to do today is we're going to work on our test review. So the 4 different methods that you got to make sure that you know are factoring, solving by square roots, quadratic formula, and then completing the square. So these are the 3 that I'm going to go over because these are the 3 that you're normally going to use. What I want to mention is you need to know the difference between standard form, which is that ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And then there's also another form that's called vertex form, which is that a times x minus h squared plus k equals 0. And a lot of y'all, and I think I had Desmos that y'all did last week, it was referred to as the transformation form. So that's the form that they're talking about. There's also something called intercept form, which is, and just in case, it's a little too much information, but this is what we actually write out as factored form, this right here. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to put this into standard form and then put it into intercept form. Okay, so since right over here we've got b squared plus 2b equals 8, we want to move that 8 to the other side so that we have it in that standard form. So we're going to subtract that 8 and move it to the other side. So this is going to give us b squared plus 2b minus 8 equals 0. And so now I'm actually going to factor this. Okay, so we're going to do our big X, and we're going to do a times c, which is going to give us negative 8, and b is going to give us 2. Okay, so here it is, negative 8, and then b is going to be 2. So we're going to think, all right, what are factors of 8? What are factors of 8 that if I multiply out, I'm going to get negative 8, but if I add together, I'm going to get 2. So factors of 8 are going to be 1, 2, 4, and 8. Now, I don't think I can add 1 and 8 together to give me 2 at any point, but I think I can do 2 and 4. Okay, so I'm going to have 2 and 4, but one of these have to be negative because I know that if I multiply and I get a negative number, one of these has to be negative. So I think it's going to be this 2 because if I add them together, I'm going to get a positive 2. Okay? So now we're going to do the box part. And again, your teacher may or may not use this. They've probably told you that if you get to this point, you can just say, hey, x plus 4 and x minus 2. But just in case, I want some practice on that box method. So put it in the box. Remember, my first term goes in this first box. And my last term goes in that last box. And these 2 terms that I just found, I'm going to put an x onto them, or a b in this case, and put them inside the box. I'm going to take the greatest common factor of the rows and columns. So from b squared and 4b, I'm going to pull out a b. From negative 2b and negative 8, it's going to pull out a negative 2. From this row, we're going to have a b. And a way that I do that so quickly is I take the sides and I multiply them together to give me what's on the inside. So b times b gives me 2b, or I'm sorry, b squared. And then b times negative 2 gives me negative 2b. So right here, I should get 4. So if I factor this, I'm going to have this as b minus 2 and b plus 4. Notice how this is in that intercept form. One key point that we have here, though, is that you have to remember that it says solve each by factoring. Okay, so we want to make sure that we take these and then set them equal to 0 and then solve. So if I take b minus 2 and set it equal to 0 and b plus 4 and set it equal to 0. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides and b is going to equal 2. And over here I'm going to get b is going to equal negative 4. So I would pause the video and try number 2 on your own and then we'll take a look at it. I'm going to make this also a little less crazy. Alright, so on number 2, the same process is actually going to happen. We're going to put this into standard form by moving this, all of these numbers to the other side. You could have moved that x squared to the other side, but I personally don't like negatives, so I want to get rid of them as much as possible. So I'm going to add the 8 to the other side. I'm going to add 6x to the other side, which is going to give me x squared plus 6x plus 8 equals 0. And so again, we're going to repeat that process of a times c. And for my visual learners, I've got a, which is 1, and then c, which is 8. So a times c is going to give us 8. And then my b value is going to be that 6. And so we're going to write that down here. So now we're going to think, all right, what are factors of 8? So factors of 8. And then for those of you who are like, I don't know factors of 8 off the top of my head, a real quick, easy way to do this is to go into your calculator, hit that y equals button, type whatever you need. So for instance, we need factors of 8. So I'm going to do 8 divided by x. I'm going to hit second graph. And that's going to pull up all potential factors of 8. So for instance, 1 times 8, 2 times 4, etc. Okay? So I know that there's no way to make 1 and 8 add together to give me 6, but 2 and 4 work. Okay, so now I'm going to draw my box. There's also another way you can do this, which is called the slip and slide method, and I'm going to show that in just 1 second. It's more useful on things that have a is bigger than 1. So I'm going to take this first term, put it in the first box, last term, put it in the last box, and those 2 terms that I just found here and here, I'm going to put an x onto them and put them inside the box. I'm going to take the greatest common factor from the rows and columns. Okay, so from here, I only have an x. From here, I have a 4. Okay, and you really want to think on this next part, because a lot of people get tripped up on this part. What times x will give you x squared? Okay, so that'll give us x. X times x gives us x squared. Okay, and then you want to think what times x will give you 2x. Well, that's 2, right? And so that's how I do that so quickly. So we're going to write that out in that factored form. And again, our instructions told us to solve. So we're going to set both of these equal to 0, which is really just going to change the sign when we actually solve. So hopefully you got -2 and -4. One thing I want you to notice on this is if you took the equation and you actually plugged it into your calculator, so you went into that y equals button, and you hit x squared plus 6x plus 8, and then you hit graph. Look at where it crosses the x-axis. It crosses at -2 and -4. So that's actually representing our x-intercepts. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. That's also a quick check. If you're like, I'm not sure if I did this right, well, where did it cross at the x-axis, okay? You can also see that in our table. So if I scroll to where it has -4, there should be a 0 for my y. And then for -2, I also have a 0 for my y. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're doing this. There's 3 different ways to check it, so you shouldn't get it wrong, but sometimes that happens. Okay? So let's try the next one. The next one, the only thing that's really different about this one is we have an 8 term that's really bigger than 1. So it makes it a little bit challenging, but it's okay, we still got it. So again, we're going to make sure that this is in that standard form. So we're going to subtract 34x from both sides, and that's going to give us 7x squared minus 34x plus 24 equals 0. Now, normally I would say, hey, find your greatest common factor and take something out, because these are pretty big numbers, but in this case, we really don't have a greatest common factor. So what we're going to do now is our big X. So we're going to identify our A, B, and C terms. A, B, and C. And I use a lot of color just because I'm a visual person. You don't have to. It's okay. So A times C. Well, I don't know that off the top of my head, so I'm going to type into my calculator. 7 times 24. And when I do that, I'm going to get 168. 168 is going to go right here. 168. And then my B term is going to go down at the bottom. So I need factors of 168 that if I multiply them together, I get 168. But if I add them together, I get -34. Okay, so I'm going to tell you right now, don't know factors of 168. So I'm going to go to my calculator and hit y equals. And I'm going to type 168 divided by x. I'm going to hit that second graph. And then I'm going to look at factors. Okay, well I know I can't add 1 and 68 together to give me negative 34. What about 2 and 84? No. 3 and 56? No. 42 and 4? No. What about 6 and 28? Well, if I make them both negative, right? 28. Yep, that works. Okay, so now I'm going to do the box method. So, box. First term goes in the first box. Last term goes in the last box. And those two terms you just found, you're going to put an X onto them and put them inside the box as well. And I'm going to pull the greatest common factor from the rows and columns on this one. So I'm going to have 7x come out here. Negative 6 comes from here. X comes from here. And negative 4 comes from here. Okay, so I should get 7x minus 6 times x minus 4. Now, here's the deal. We could have done this the slip and slide method, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So, and we're not technically done with this, but we want to make sure that you understand that there's a different method. If you're like, I don't like the box, I don't understand the box, it's okay. So you're going to take, right here after you do the big X, you're going to take what your A term is and divide those two factors by your A term. Now, if you get a whole number, so like negative 28 divided by 7 is negative 4, all you're going to do is write it out. So what I mean by that is bring an X out and then write the number that you get after you divide. So that's pretty easy. Over here, if it's not going to be a whole number, so like if I type into my calculator 6 divided by 7, that's not going to give you a whole number, right? So I'm going to say take the bottom, move it to the front, put an X there, and then whatever number is left on the top, just right next to it. Notice how this and this are the same things. And that took me like 2 seconds. So if you're like, I don't want to do the box, that's another option. So now we're going to actually solve. So we're going to take both of these, set them equal to 0, and solve. So this one will give me positive 4 because I'm going to add that 4 to the other side. Over here I'm going to add 6, and then I'm going to divide by 7. So that's going to give me x equals 6/7 and x equals 4. I would pause the video and I would try number 4. I have about 2 minutes to get through this, so try it on your own, and then I'm going to work through it pretty quickly. Alright, so hopefully you got a chance to work through that one. If you didn't, make sure you pause the video and try it. So I'm going to identify my A, B, and C. And I got to move this guy to the other side, so I'm going to subtract him. So I'm going to rewrite this. Okay, so that's that standard form. Again, identify your A, B, and C. You don't have to use color, but I like it. This looks good. So then you've got the big X, and A times C is going to give you negative 120, and B is going to give me 19. I'm going to my calculator and say 120 divided by X. And I hit second graph. I'm going to look at my factors, and then I'm trying to find something that if I add together, I'm going to get 19. What about 5 and 24? 5, 24. One of these have to be negative, so it's going to be that negative 5, right? Okay. So then for the box method, you're going to put first term in the first box, last term in the last box, and those two terms you just found, you're going to slap an X onto them and put them inside the box as well. Then you're going to take the greatest common factors of the rows and columns, so that's going to be 6 in, negative 5, and this one 5, and 4. So this should be 6 in minus 5, or plus 4. Over here, if you did the slip and slide method, you would have divided by 6. And so 24 divided by 6 is going to give you 4. Over here, this isn't going to give you a whole number, so you're going to bring that 6x to the front. So same thing here. And yes, you could write it x or n. It's okay. So if I actually solved for it, I'm going to get n equals negative 4. and n also equals 5.